Hello, everyone. It's 6 o'clock, and we're about to hear from our final keynote speaker of the Impact Summit. So I just had to tear myself away from Erin's YouTuber swap, and all 5 team-led talks from this afternoon from Ellie, Erin, Z, and I will be summarized on the Slack, and the links we crowdsourced will all be shared, so make sure to watch out for that. But it's been such an amazing full weekend with all of you. And remember that it doesn't have to end here. Keep in touch with us on Slack, reach out to the recruiters you met earlier today, and sign up for our newsletter. And after tonight's talk, we're going to be announcing the results of our social startup competition. So make sure you stick around. And so without further ado, I am so excited and honored to introduce our closing keynote speaker, Marina Nitze. And Marina was the Chief Technology Officer of the US Department of Veterans Affairs from 2013 to 2017. And she helped found the US Digital Service, and she served as a senior advisor on technology in the White House under the Obama administration. She is currently a New America Fellow focused on improving America's child welfare system, and she's also helping organizations solve mission-critical IT challenges. So Marina, we're so happy to have you, and you can take it away.
Thank you so much. It's really great to be here. I love the energy so far. I'm going to talk for a few minutes, tell you a little bit about how I ended up with the career that I had, and share a couple of stories, but I'm really looking forward to the Q&A portion. So we had this saying when we were in the federal government: no one is coming, it's up to you. And I have really taken this to heart, and I hope it's something that many of you take to heart as well, which is, prior to being in government, I believed that government was full of special people that somehow came from a different place and had different training and had different lives than me. And then once I showed up in government, the greatest lesson that I learned was that government is made of other people like you and I. And that also means that it's you and I that can make the changes that can change our country and our outcomes. So when the way that I got into government initially was actually a funny small story in Seattle, where I live. There was an announcement that there was going to be a $20,000 prize for a company or a small team that could make the best app using open Seattle government data. And I thought, that's sort of a silly way to spend $20,000. $20,000 isn't enough to have an app that's in production. It's not really enough to have a production level team. So you're not really going to get a production level app for the city, but you're also not going to get a sense of community. You're not going to help get people to know each other. You're not going to help the Seattle startup ecosystem get to know the Seattle technology team inside the government. And so I looked into this $20,000 prize. It was run by a committee, an advisory board over the mayor. I applied to join this committee. I was accepted. I volunteered to chair the committee that oversaw this prize, which people let me do. And then I canceled the prize. And instead, I turned it into the first startup weekend government edition in the country, where we had a long weekend where the Seattle tech startup community and the Seattle government IT community got together and brainstormed on ideas, some of which led to companies and other partnerships and things. So from that, I was watching TechCrunch Disrupt one day and saw Todd Park, who is CTO of the United States, say that he was looking for some tech-savvy entrepreneurs to come and be disruptive in government as the first class of Presidential Innovation Fellows. And my first reaction to that was, wow, that sounds so cool. And my second reaction was, there is no way I could do that. I'm not qualified for that. I didn't have a government background. I don't have a degree in political science. I don't live in DC. Why would they ever pick me? But something spurred me on to send in my resume anyway. And here's a free tip. I bought this $3 beautiful Adobe Illustrator resume template off graphicriver.net so that my resume would stand out a little bit. And months went by and I heard nothing. And then I get a call asking me to join the first class of Presidential Innovation Fellows. It turns out the government was looking for people like me after all. And I later heard that of the 600 applications, it helped that mine was blue and helped stand out in the pile. So highly recommended, best $3 that I've definitely ever spent. And from there, I learned a lot from my mentors and the people around me of how I was able to make a difference. I didn't know how government worked beyond, the schoolhouse rock song of how a bill becomes a law, which incidentally is not at all how a bill becomes a law. I really learned from my colleagues, started on some small projects, definitely screwed them up. And then one day got invited to cover someone else at a meeting about the VA disability claims backlog, which had literally offices that were buckling under the weight of unprocessed disability claims from veterans. And they had thought about like, hey, what if we had a technologist at this meeting? And I just completely fell in love with the problem when I showed up. And I knew that that was something I was going to be able to help with. And then 6 months later, I found myself as the chief technology officer of the VA. And here I was again, somebody that a year prior thought that government was not a place for people like me. So I share that to say that government is definitely a place for people like us. And I hope that you will think about your own careers in the public sector as well. So I wanted to share 2 stories. The first one is about finding your paperclip. There's this really cool story, if you get a chance to look it up, about a guy who had a paperclip and through a succession of barters ended up getting a house. And I thought about that a lot on my first day as CTO of the VA. The VA is a 330,000 person organization. The IT budget alone is $4.6 billion a year. And I had been told when I asked them to define my job description, that my job description was to redefine the art of the possible of how America serves and honors its veterans. So, no small feat there. But to do that, I had 0 employees and a $0 budget. And so I sat in my office, my empty office, looking around and thinking like, what can my paperclip be? Like, how can I find something that I can prove my worth here in the organization and trade that up so that I'll be able to start getting the resources to envision the VA that I want to happen. And so I, with 3 colleagues, ended up designing this booklet called the 21st Century VA. And I used an entire paycheck actually to print it off at Kinko's. And it laid out like, what could the VA be? What if veterans could apply for healthcare online? What if when you went to our hospital, you also learned about our 82 other benefit lines? Like, what if? And it laid out these 48 different ideas. But I wasn't sure how to get people to read my booklet yet. And one day, a member of the executive secretary team popped her head in my office and she said, "Hey, Marina, have you seen Green Pack 482? And I said, well, I know. What is a Green Pack? I'll help you look for it. And I learned that when members of Congress send the VA official correspondence, like a letter, it gets couriered over by a human and then put into a green folder that they call Green Packs, and then it was numbered. But in this 12-story building, all the different people that had to sign off on this the answer that would go back to the legislature would have to write into this green folder. And so the executive secretariat team was constantly going around this 12-story building trying to figure out where the last person was that had this green folder. And I saw this problem and I was like, I could probably help solve this with a barcode. If we could print a barcode on the folders and pass out barcode scanners to the executive secretary that matches up with each leader that may have a green pack, they can scan it in when it arrives on their desk, and then everybody will know where the green pack last was. And so I built this app in like an afternoon on a Friday. And then from that point on, the executive secretariat team believed that I was made of magic because I could generate barcodes, which I assure you I was not magic. There was an off-the-shelf tool that just kind of could print them out. But as a result of that, that was my first paperclip. I helped them find a way to organize their folders, and then they helped me get meetings with all of the other senior leaders where I was able to share this 21st Century VA vision and help get their perspective on it and find different ways that I could plug in. It was a long haul, but over the next 5 years, we were able to build the US Digital Service. I had a team of 75 people instead of 0. I had a multi-million-dollar budget. And of the 48 ideas in this booklet, by the time that I left in 2017, we had accomplished 46 of them, which was a pretty cool feeling towards the end. And the second story I'd like to share is really about looking between the silos. So I think a lot of people come in, if it's government, other large bureaucracies, and you think like, I'm going to solve healthcare, or I'm going to fix the VA, or I'm going to replace the mainframe. I don't advise that path, because when you try to go after a problem that is so overwhelmingly huge, it's hard to make traction. And the tip I would give you is look between the silos. Silos and bureaucracies are very well protected, very well defined spaces. People do not want you in their territory. They are designed to protect it, and often trying to make change by coming at it full, from the front, you will get defeated. And so instead, it's about how can you kind of chip away at the edges. And one key way that I found to do this over and over again is to follow real people in real processes. So wherever you are, if you can follow a real claim being processed from start to finish, and don't read a manual, don't ask people to explain to you how they do a process. Follow real people through the whole process. This is something that I did at VA over and over, and now that I work in child welfare, it's something that I do over and over and over, because it's the handoff points within systems that you're going to find the greatest opportunity to improve things for the users. You're going to find the greatest cost savings for taxpayers or for other funders. And you're going to find the least resistance to your ideas, because by design, bureaucracies are not protecting kind of the space between the silos. As a quick example of this in child welfare, many systems are struggling to recruit enough foster parents so that kids have safe places to go. And when there are not enough foster parents, kids end up in group homes, which everybody agree are bad places for kids. But when you recruit families with billboards and radio ads or very targeted recruitment or whatever else that you may be doing, there is a tremendously high drop-off rate of the families that come in versus the families that end up being licensed and end up taking a child. And many people approach that problem by saying, like, well, we have to recruit harder. We'll use more billboards and more radio ads and more money on the recruitment. But I was able to go and spend time with families that were going through the process of becoming licensed. And then most critically, I talked with families that had dropped out of the process of becoming licensed, because I really wanted to know what their experience was and what had caused them to drop out. And overwhelmingly, they were saying, like, it's the process. You know, I call in the afternoon and I ask how many training hours I have left, or did you get my medical records from my doctor, or did you get my third reference in? And the person answering the phone has no idea and never calls me back. And if you're treating me that way when you're recruiting me, how are you going to treat me when I have a child in my home that's having a crisis? So I don't trust you and I'm out. And this really caused me to focus a tremendous amount on the experience of approving and licensing foster families as a critical first step before recruitment, because otherwise you are recruiting people into a black hole. And I've spent a lot of my professional life in the last couple of years helping streamline that process. And every single time the answer is following real people, going through the real process, and learning that, you know, like, there are grandmothers who are terrified of the background check form because they have a shoplifting conviction from 40 years ago, and they think that will disqualify them from being approved to take their grandchild. And they're just terrified for weeks upon months. When if we added humans back to that mix, a human could reassure them that that low level of a crime from a long time ago is definitely not a disqualifier. So often when we try to make processes more efficient, we try to automate things. We put forms online. We don't start the human process until, you know, we've received all your paperwork first. We really lose the opportunity to help many families get through the process in the first place. And I think this applies to everything. It applies to unemployment. It applies to food stamps. It applies to accessing nonprofit services. It applies to every government service that is out there. Frankly, I think following actual users going through a real process even works, even in a hyper commercial environment. So I would really encourage you to do that. And you don't need any special skills to do that. I use this tool called Mural. I put the URL on my slide. It's just a process map. You can do it with a pen and paper and just follow people through the process and start finding ways that you can improve it for them. And then you will earn some political capital by doing that. And with your improvements that show real change, that you're going to be able to get access to harder and harder problems. You're going to be invited to bigger and bigger meetings. And before you know it, you may turn around and look that you've, you know, replaced all of va.gov, which was a pretty cool moment to look back on 6 years after I had started that project. So I'd love to do some Q&A and not just kind of talk at you, if folks would like to do that. So.
Yep. All right. Hello. So thank you for that talk. And I think we're going to wait on questions from the chat. But before then, I have some questions for you. So you are in a really unique space right now. It's like at the intersection of technology and management and child welfare. So like, how did you find the space? Like, what advice would you have for other people who are looking for these types of unique intersections? And like, how did you personally get involved?
Yeah. I love problem solving, and I suspect probably most of his audience loves problem solving. I don't think you have to be the world's best technologist. I'm definitely not like an expert Ruby on Rails programmer, but I know enough to be dangerous. And if that's something of interest in this audience, like railstutorial.org, best thing I've ever done in my life, Michael Hartle's tutorial, because it's, you know enough to be able to whip up an app. And more importantly, you know enough that when the contractor or the IT team or somebody tells you like, oh, that's going to take 6 months and be $5 million, you can kind of call them on it. I one time had a contractor try to make changing a link on a website sound like $100,000 project. They said, oh, you have to change the source attribute of an href something. And I was like, bullshit. And so being able to call bullshit is a really important skill that not a lot of people have. Technology is often missing from government. It's also often missing from problem solving. And people don't know what they don't know. So if you can be that voice, be polite, right? If you can be the polite, trusted voice to say like, actually it's this, or actually there's a no code or low code tool that you could do that you could use that, or actually there's a way, just putting a form on the internet, for example, often will not solve any problem. Like really helping people think through what problem that they're actually trying to solve. In terms of how I got involved, there's this great organization that I would encourage anyone to check out called CASA, which stands for Court Appointed Special Advocates. I've been one for 15 years now. It's kind of like Big Brothers, Big Sisters, but a little bit different in that you're not a mentor to foster youth. You're their court-appointed eyes and ears. So your responsibility is to help make sure, for example, that they don't have to switch schools, because switching, you can fill out the 7 pieces of paperwork to keep them from having to switch schools. Or you can advocate for the judge that they get more therapy or whatever else that it may be that they need. I learned a lot about bureaucracy hacking from my CASA work, and it continues to be, to this day, some of the most rewarding way that I ever spend my time.
Yeah, thank you. And a follow-up question kind of to that, how do we get more of this space to bureaucracy hack? Like, how can we make it easier for people like you to like make systems better? Like some ideas might be, should we have like consultants like who try to do some of this work? Should we make it part of job descriptions that someone looks for ways to improve the organization they're in? Like, what suggestions do you have?
My experience has shown me that the place to bureaucracy hack is from inside the bureaucracy. There are some changes that you can make from the outside, but they're almost impossible to make if you don't have a partner on the inside. And also, once you're on the inside, it teaches you how the bureaucracy actually works, what the risk frameworks are, what the incentives are, so that you can help those outside partners and like collectively work together to make the change that you want to see. I encourage you to go inside a bureaucracy. Like I never, ever, ever saw myself serving in government, ever. And it was a life transforming event on every level. And I really recommend finding a way to get in. And there's many fellowship programs. There's Govern for America. There's Presidential Innovation Fellows. There's Foster America Fellows. Like a fellowship is probably one great way to get your foot in the door, but also get access to that level of mentorship that you might not get with an entry-level career position in the same bureaucracy.
Great answer. So we have another question from teammate Aaron Meyer. Are there current low-hanging fruits in civic or government technology? And if so, like what are there?
I think so much of user experience is actually a low-hanging fruit because this maybe sounds a little bit crazy, but like governments are not designed to talk to or interact with their users. I had a very transformational moment early on in the VA when I sat out a bench outside the Menlo Park VA hospital. And I was just chatting with people, trying to get to know their experience. And I met a woman who, very long story short, her husband had been hospitalized there for the last 9 months for a myriad of issues. And she's telling me kind of their life story. And in my head, I'm thinking like, oh, your kids qualify for education benefits and you'd get an automobile allowance and you definitely qualify for pension. And I'm kind of ticking this off in my brain. And after she finishes telling me what an amazing healthcare experience she had at VA and how much she loved the care and the doctors and the nurses, I said, oh, well, what other VA benefits do you take advantage of? And she said, what other VA benefits? So it was possible to live in our hospital for 9 months and not ever know that we had 82 other benefit lines. And I think government is often that way, where each program is stood up in its own office with its own manual and its own staff and its own mainframe, and they're never interacting. But the humans have to interact. The humans have to go to all the different offices. And so if you can go from that angle, you can really shine a light on often like drop dead simple opportunities between the different silos.
Awesome. And I'm going to pull up Linda's question, which touched on something earlier. So you said that fellowships were a great way to get involved in this space. But as Linda is interested in technology, public service, and the military, are there any other opportunities that are good for students?
Yeah, I would definitely check out Coding It Forward, which was stood up to set up a lot of technology opportunities for college students in the federal government at that intersection, including with the Department of Defense.
Awesome. We just had them at our career fair this afternoon.
Great. They're fabulous.
They are. And Caitlin would like to know what kind of skill sets are good for this public sector, and are they different from the private sector? Like, could you talk about the skill sets that you draw on and are valuable for your work?
Sure. I don't know that I'd strongly differentiate between public sector and private sector skills. Sometimes a bureaucracy is a bureaucracy. I think high EQ in government and in bureaucracies is really critical, because getting up and announcing the problem or announcing the solution is almost never the way to actually solve a problem. You have to kind of understand who are the players, what are their incentives, what are their obstacles, what are their risk frameworks, and then strategically design what your solutions are going to be from that. You have to play the long game. There's going to be quick wins sometimes, yes. But, I remember when I pitching for my book, our 21st Century VA booklet in 2013, the idea of taking over va.gov and the front door seemed so impossible to me that my best possible vision was to have vets.gov, which would be kind of a side door where we could build the new benefits and services and just make that a popular side destination. Well, since I've left the VA, vets.gov got so popular that actually took over va.gov. And now if you go to va.gov, it's the same project that we had built before. So having that North Star vision and being able to hold on, because it's a long game, could be a decade or more for your solution to fully see fruition. But the thing is, if you don't start now or start from wherever you are, it's still going to take 10 years. So if you wait 10 years, it's going to take another 10 years. So you have to kind of start. But patience and empathy are two really, really, really critical skills, especially for technologists.
That's awesome. And how long did it take you from first getting hired to pushing this North Star vision of the new VA site?
I was hired in July of 2012, started pushing that vision in January, February of 2013, and we launched the very first beta of vets.gov in November of 2016. So it was definitely a long slog.
Awesome. So patience, I guess. That's as a college student who's like on a 4-year kind of time horizon, like that just seems like forever to me. But
it seemed like forever when I started as well. But I often give this advice when people call me because they don't know. They're like, is it time for me to leave the VA? Is it time for me to leave where I am? And I say, like, do you see another door? Like, between you and your goal, do you see another possible door to try and a doorknob to jiggle to get there? And if the answer is yes, then like try the fourth door, the fifth door, the sixth door. And that might sound very frustrating, but again, like, somebody has to do this work. And there's no reason why it can't be you that jiggles the seventh door that is ultimately the one that opens and ultimately the one that gets to that solution.
Great insight. All right, so now we're going to turn to Sina's question. So on the current project you're working on, which is like child welfare and improving the systems that you mentioned, what do you find the most challenging technical and non-technical aspect of this project?
Yeah, the most challenging technical aspect is making sure that systems have the right technical staff to maintain, because often people are tempted to go in and actually I will say this is also the most challenging technical thing too, is replacing the mainframe is just never the solution. It's everybody's inclination that it's the solution because they look at it and they're like, it's COBOL or it's an ancient DB2, like that must be the problem. We must remove it. It is almost never the problem. And often when you even see a modernization product that's successful, the mainframe is still behind it if you poke a little bit. So often, like, what you need to do is help people understand what the actual KPIs and goals are that they're trying to go after. And again, usually, like, that is not, you don't solve them by the mainframe. You don't solve it by putting a form on the internet. Maybe that will save 7 minutes. But if it's a 210-day process, does that 7 minutes count? Like, what are you trying to do? Governments and public sector in general tends to not have human KPIs, key performance indicators. And so really, to me, that is a big non-technical challenge. It's helping them figure out, what is the goal? Like, are we trying to keep kids out of, in foster care where I work now, are we trying to keep kids out of foster care? Yes. Are we trying to keep kids out of group homes? Yes. Then frame it that way. Don't frame it as like, we get 32% of applicants through this process. Are they the applicants that our kids need? Right? Because kids are not widgets that just fit into beds. So I don't want to recruit 400 foster homes that don't match the needs of my kids, that aren't in their school districts, that don't speak their language. So helping come up with human KPIs and ways to get there is a very big challenge, but it's doable, which is a good thing.
That's awesome. So I have another question for you. So you talk about your whiteboard collection in other talks, yeah. Which I understand is pretty extensive. And your website, your personal banner is just filled with colorful sticky notes. And so I wanted to ask, on a personal note, like, what is your approach to brainstorming?
I love dry erase boards. So I have a confession to make, which is my dry erase board collection is less extensive now because I have covered my wall with a 3M Post-it dry erase board, which is better than dry erase paint, because once it gets that ooky dry erase, funk to it, you can just peel it off the wall and put a new one on the wall rather than dry erase paint that is stuck with the wall. So my process is usually, I like to immerse myself. So I'll read whatever the topic may be. I want to go into the office. I want to shadow workers. I want to read the manuals. I want to look at the forms. I want to search Twitter for what people are talking about. I want to just get like deeply underwater with the content. And then I want to stand with my dry erase board and my colors, because I need lots of different colors depending on my mood, to start laying out, like, what is the current process and what might the improvements and the levers be to getting those improvements in place. So I'm all about like dry erase boarding. And then if I'm on the go, I have a big pad of blank paper that's like legal sized with my skinny fine point markers that I basically travel with. And I will do the same, just kind of at a smaller scale on my big paper. And I love doing mural boards after I do that, because they like knock people's design is like such a way to stand out. I mentioned my $3 resume template. Mural is another way, where instead of people looking at my chicken scratch dry erase picture, if I can make it look beautiful and professional, which is not very hard in mural, and I'm not a designer, then they really they pay attention. They want to come look at it. They want to read it. They want to give you their feedback.
Yeah, very nice. So turning to, again, your work with child welfare. So SNPDA would like to ask, do you see like technology or other interventions that could be used to improve like graduation rates or educational components in high school or college? Do you see anything that could be transferred here?
I have a lot of thoughts on this that I probably can't fit in, but at a high level, like, you really have to go sit with these youth and understand like what is preventing them from graduating. And it's often, like, unfortunately, like 1,000 different problems that technology itself will not solve. There are counties that have where foster youth have single-digit high school graduation rates. I'm talking like 7 or 8%, which is abysmal and awful, and we should be ashamed as a country. Pairing, a lot of it has to do with helping them connect with a supportive adult in their life that can help them navigate everything from like, can you get to school? Do you have transportation? Do you have clean clothes? Do you have access to the textbooks that you need? Do you have access to a mentor? Working backward from that, can we stop you from changing schools 8, 9, 10 times? Because every time a youth changes school, foster youth or otherwise, right, it's going to be that much harder to catch up. So some of this really gets down to like root cause analysis. I want to get to you a lot way before you're struggling to graduate in 12th grade. I want to get to you ahead of time so that we can streamline and keep you in your school. One idea for a technology solution that I'm working on piloting with a couple of states is a data-driven recruitment tool. So when I try to find a home for a youth, maybe they're in 8th or 9th grade right now, I want to prioritize families that are in their school district so they don't have to move schools in the first place. And then it also keeps them in their school community with their teachers and other people that know them. And right now, that's not how recruitment is done. Recruitment is billboards and radio ads and very general. So I'm working with a couple of states to capture when somebody does a placement search and it has 0 results. Let's capture that as a recruitment need. And then you can do some really basic modeling, like not complicated data science, to say on average, in this school district, we need 8 homes. And then you can send the recruitment team to recruit 8 homes. And that tends to actually be an easier thing for them to do when it's very targeted and focused. So I think that some of it is just systemically going back and saying a big problem with graduation rates is changing schools so many times. What if we don't have to make you change schools so many times?
Yeah, great answer there. And Buvni would like to know, sometimes your work can be frustrating, and maybe that's not true. Maybe you love every minute of it. But how do you keep your final North Star goal in mind when it seems like change is really slow or change isn't happening?
The work is definitely frustrating. I would say it is more often than not frustrating. And holding the North Star has been something that really, really helps me. So when I was at the VA, I had 2 things. One is I had my 21st Century VA booklet with me all the time, which in the beginning, it was just an idea. But over time, okay, now we got 1 idea and it's real. And now we got 2 ideas and it's real. And that momentum really, really, really helps. The second thing that I did, which is perhaps a little bit dark, but I will share that I did it anyway, is I kept a photo on my desk of a military widow and her son who were having a picnic on her husband's grave. And I would tell myself when I was having a bad day, first of all, I was not having as bad a day as her. And second of all, that it was the least I could do to help make sure that that child in that photo was going to be able to go to school and take advantage of all the benefits that his father had literally died for. And again, it's a little bit dark, but it was good to put into perspective. However bad my day was, other people had it much worse. And as an American, it was important. It is important to me to give back.
Totally. It does seem like a theme throughout your work is what does this do for people? How are people going to engage with us? Which is really humane.
Yeah.
So Linda is curious, from your experience working at the VA and the USDS, how do you think government and big tech can work together? And if possible, how can we keep government in sync with what's going on in the private sector?
Yeah, I think this is really about partnership. So I think you need technologists that understand outside solutions and outside partners inside the government to help write the procurements, to help lay out the modernization pathways, to be a seat at the table when agencies are coming up with their strategies and their priorities, to help them think about how technology, modern or otherwise, can help support that. If you don't have anybody on the inside, and I think this was a really key, is a really key benefit of the digital service and why we stood it up, how can you possibly evaluate the external vendors? How can you know the one that is offering you something that's going to be really great for veterans or the one that's trying to charge you $100,000 to change a link? And so having that internal person, and I think it also helps to rotate through. I think I previously probably had this vision of, the revolving door of government is a bad thing. I'm sure there are instances where it is a bad thing, but in this case, I think you absolutely want private sector technologists that have been on the inside and can appreciate some of the struggles and challenges that they're experiencing, that appreciates the approval processes and the risk frameworks and the inspector general. And then you need people that have been in private sector tech on the inside of government to help, again, write the contracts, make the decisions, lay out what's possible.
Yeah, thank you. And Bhuvni has a pretty topical question. So how has COVID affected the US child welfare system? And what types of solutions have you come up with to try to confront these problems?
Yeah, well, it's affected it in every possible way that you could imagine. But I believe very strongly that you should never waste a crisis. And that was certainly a lesson that I learned at the VA. And so in child welfare, for example, streamlining adoptions had been really hard for a long time because courts would only accept wet signatures, which means you had to physically sign a piece of paper and then mail it into places. COVID has forced everybody to be digital, which now opens up this world of digital signatures to an entire set of the public sector that previously did not accept them. And that may seem like a small thing, but when you talk again about like the experience of becoming a foster parent, the experience of becoming an adoptive parent, and the experience of getting your kids back, which is what happens to more than half of kids and is the explicit goal of child welfare, is to reunify families and help them heal and be whole again. So not overburdening people with paperwork is a key part of that. And so leveraging COVID times to point out ways to use technology, digital signatures, email, Zoom. There have been tons of Zoom adoptions that has been pretty cool to watch. And that helps also rethink, like, a big barrier to reunification in child welfare is often court schedules. They're so behind that, even if it's apparent to everybody on a case that a child should go home, today, it could take 3, 4, 5 months for that to happen because of a court schedule. Well, could virtual hearings help with that? Could we do virtual safety inspections so that instead of having to wait 2, 3 months for someone to come to your home and then tell you, hey, you don't have an oven lock, and then wait 2, 3 more months and come back to your house to make sure that you have an oven lock, which is a real example. Let's, walk me around your house for 10 minutes on your phone. I'll identify a few issues. And then once you show me that they're resolved over your phone, I can check that part of the checklist. There have been a lot of opportunities like that in child welfare. Also in child welfare, you don't want a bunch of kids together in a group home because you don't want a bunch of people together in general. So I think it's helping accelerate a lot of efforts to keep kids from going into group homes in the first place and to get them out faster, which is really—
Yeah, that is exciting. That is exciting. Never waste a crisis. I like that. We're going to probably use that in our newsletter where we have quotes every week. So Erin is curious, if you're dealing with technologists from liberal places like San Francisco and New York City, how do you deal with the maybe sentiment of anti-military from the coasts?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. I don't know that I felt that a ton from the technologists that I did work with, because again, empathy is very important. Coming into the Department of Defense announcing that you don't want it to exist is not probably a great point of negotiation. But something I would offer is that if it's going to exist anyway, there may be ways that you can influence it to be better or smaller or more effective, depending on the particular issue. If there is a government program that you perhaps disagree with, there are ways that you may be able to work to create an alternative to it, or to make it less powerful, or to make it work more effectively. It's a little bit hard to answer this in generalities. And I take obviously the military very seriously, but like you could work with the Department of Defense on helping make military healthcare better. That I think is probably something we could all agree with. Or if you are anti-military, maybe you come to the VA team where you can help take care of veterans and separated service members.
Yeah, that's a good answer. I agree with the specifics. So I have a question for you that deals with like general career path stuff. So a lot of students attending the conference are trying to decide what to do with their lives and what to do with their coding skills. So what's like a way they can decide whether or not government work is like a good fit for them? And is there any tests they can do to figure out whether like this is a great option for them?
I don't know about tests, but I would say like the best test is to try it. So if you can get a summer internship, if you can find a project, there may be an advisory board in your city or your county. There's officially government, and then there's plenty.
Sorry, everyone. I'm going to how about we all take a 2-minute break? In our break, think of a question you might want to ask Marina, and I will try to email her and see if we can get her back online. But thank you for joining us so far, and I'll check back in with you at 6:42. Hello, Marina. Welcome back. Are you back online? Can you hear me all right?
Power in a blackout. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no. Well, I'm so glad that we got up and running so quickly. So, yeah. Do you remember your train of thought before the blackout?
I believe I was saying that like the best way, I don't know about a formal test, but the best way I would recommend is to actually try it. If you can get on a local board, if you can join a mayor's advisory, or find a local nonprofit that has a cause that you passionately believe in. I bet that they're working with the private sector, and that may be a way to try a project of any size. I mean, and then work on from there.
All right. And cool. Victor has a question. It's a 2-part question, but have you seen challenges in government? How have you seen challenges, I assume like in the foster care system, work, and like how does solving problems in the government and communities work together, I think is the heart of this question.
It depends on how well that relationship is there. Some communities you're going to find the government doesn't talk at all to the community, and that again can be a real opportunity for you to be that bridge. So often people think the government is not talking to the community because there is a group of people in a room that have decided that they don't want to serve citizens, or they don't want to talk to them. And I found more often than not, like, you almost wish there was a room of people because then you could fire them. But it's actually a lot more complicated than that, that they're just maybe literally not set up. Something that you will find, particularly in IT, if you think about risk frameworks, people will make you fill out 80 pieces of paperwork about how you're protecting confidential information and how you're going to do this and how you're going to do that. But there is never a spot on the form that talks about the human impact or the cost of not having the technology. How many youth will be homeless if I don't have a list, if I don't have a way to contact them, is not on the paperwork. And that can be incredibly frustrating, but at the same time, making emotional pleas about it doesn't work either. What you have to do is actually fill out the paperwork the way that it is, and then that's how you get, the youth housed or whatever else your goal may be.
Yeah, that makes sense. And staying on this thread of possible harms, so with COVID, Kaylin has heard that domestic abuse and child abuse has unfortunately increased since everyone is staying home. And this is just a really hard question, but like, are there solutions that you're working on for these situations, or are there like ways that technologists can help?
That is a very real concern, and it's very hard. And I don't know that I have an answer that I can share in an easy snippet. But let me say another related answer to that is there's going to be a lot more child abuse calls right now from families because they're poor, because now they have lost jobs and they cannot afford maybe their utilities, and people will call in and say, hey, this child is showing up unbathed or wearing the same clothes over and over. A way that technologists can help with that is to help rethink, like, what are the standard operating procedures when people call in child neglect that is actually related to poverty, which the federal government estimates is why 60% of kids are in foster care, is because their families are poor, not because of abuse. And so really helping rethink, like, how can I make the easiest possible thing for the system be to give the family $500 to turn their water back on, and not, I'm going to send an investigator to your home. Because once you have an investigator coming to your home, they have a mindset that they are there to find something. And I suspect, like, they could find something at my house. They could find something at your house. How instead can we make the easiest thing for the system to give the family the support that they need in the first place? Many people have brought up the concept that if you can't afford daycare while you go to work and you leave your kids home alone, and we take them away and put them in foster care, we will pay the foster parent daycare stipend. So why can't we pay the parents' daycare stipend and keep the kids out of foster care in the first place? That's the problem to solve.
Yeah, again, with the root causes.
Yeah.
That's a good insight. So given that you're connected to like you're just in such an interdisciplinary, like interesting space, do you see any like emerging trends or nascent organizations that are doing like good, unique, sort of reformatory work that you're excited about and want to share with the people here?
I'm so excited every time I see human-centered design start gaining ground in the public sector, because it surfaces so many opportunities in a way the government has just not been designed to work before. And I love like solutioning, right? So I want that perspective, and I want governments to be asking for it, and I want them to be thinking about their end users in the processes as they're designing them, as they're improving them, as they're modernizing them. So that to me is most exciting. I think I'm also watching with great curiosity and hope as states start collaborating more together on things that are common to states, like food stamps and other things. Like, why is everybody starting their system from scratch? A big part of my work in child welfare, I run a 15-state working group. And so often, like, the value of this working group is simply having a way for these 15 decision makers in 15 states to hear from one another about what they're doing, or hear, oh, Indiana just did that, we could do that too. Or, hey, you know, Maryland just did this, Hawaii is doing that, why don't you guys get together and do it together? And that ranges from everything from like pool safety guidelines, like different in Hawaii from Maryland and California. It's not, but you're doing that work X number of times. And then, is case management for child welfare really different from California to Ohio? No. So how might there be ways to share best practices and underlying technology across states? I think that's pretty interesting. And the Beck Center at Georgetown is starting to do some research around that.
Yeah, thank you. Great. I'll send the Beck Center in the chat. So
Yeah.
Erin, you brought up giving a family just $500 to help them directly alleviate the effects of poverty. What are your thoughts on UBI and other cash transfers, and how feasible is this?
Yeah. So this gets into one of these problems that I think people, that I struggle with tremendously at the VA, which is the VA doesn't necessarily know who veterans are. And that kind of blows people's mind. But there were two problems. One is plenty of people were veterans before there were electronic records, or plenty of people, served before there were electronic records. And then also, you have so many different databases of people that it is not clear kind of what your unique universe of users is. And I think that this problem comes up in food stamps. Pandemic EBT, many states have been trying to match school databases of children's names that don't have any reference to parents with databases of adults that may be eligible. And this is kind of a murky area, because some people are like, I don't want the government to have, like a database of all humans. But it's also weird to think that the federal government does not have a database of all Americans. The Social Security Administration does not. The IRS does not. I think we all saw, like checks being issued to dead people or interesting names and such as coming on through there. So the problem to solve there is really the identity issue. And then on top of that, like what happens with undocumented immigrants, or people that may be off the grid for other reasons, or people that are have changed their Social Security number, which is a thing that is possible to do, but creates like tremendous downstream database challenges. So I think that ends up being your feasibility challenge. That said, you can start somewhere. Like that, there's a Pareto principle there that you could probably issue checks to 80% of people and then start chipping away at the last 20%.
That makes sense. 80-20 rule. So Samuel has a question. The common narrative is that developing and reiterating tech in the government is just annoyingly slow. And you spoke to some of these challenges earlier. But how much truth is there to this? Do you think that maybe the challenge is overrated or underrated? And what are the true bottlenecks?
Yeah, it's definitely a huge problem, and it's definitely slow. But it doesn't have to be slow all the time. Some of it is because government approaches these projects as huge behemoths instead of like smaller agile projects. So like replacing a mainframe that has 25 million lines of code in it is just not going to be a thing that you guys can whip up in 3 months. And my suggested approach instead is to start looking at like, okay, what's not in the mainframe at all? And this ended up being a great area in child welfare because foster parent licensing is not in their IT systems. It's done in Excel spreadsheets and on paper. Great, because that's now a space that you can modernize fairly quickly because you're only dealing with a paper world. So looking at ways you can chip away what isn't in the IT system at all that you could help automate or build something on the side for. And then what is a small enough scope of humans that could be positively impacted that you could pull them off? And like at the VA, one thing that we did early on that was not planned, but it was another example of not wasting a crisis, was the VA healthcare claims backlog, where there was a warehouse with over 800,000 pending applications to get into VA healthcare. And we were on the front page of the New York Times. The Inspector General had estimated that hundreds of thousands of veterans in that backlog had already died waiting to try to get in. And the online application that existed up to that point was only getting 8, as in 8 fingers, applications a month. And people were like, oh, it's because veterans don't use the internet. And we said, well, that's interesting. Let's poke at that a little bit. And it ended up being that the online application didn't work. That's why there were 8 a month. And so we built a simple mobile app, but the complicating part was we had to build 154 different backends for it because it had to connect to 154 different systems. But that's okay. We took on that complexity. We made it simple for the veterans. And now almost 1 million veterans have since enrolled in VA healthcare using that form, which is a pretty cool. If I'm having a bad day, sometimes I go and I refresh the number.
That's amazing. What an inspirational number to look at. So Aaron is wondering, I don't know if you can comment on this, it's okay if you can't, but what is the starting salary of a software engineer at the VA?
Sure. So federal government salaries are public information, and there's something called the GS scale. I don't know what GS stands for, I should. The highest it can go is somewhere in around 155,000. And the U.S. Digital Service tends to hire at GS 13 and on up, which is about 100,000 on up. And the GS schedule pays different depending on where in the country you live, because it has like a base, and then depending where you are, it has a geographic addition to it. So you can look the GS schedule up.
Excellent. And does it also pay based on experience? So would it be lower for someone like right out of college or with just 1 or 2 years of experience?
In theory, the GS schedule is supposed to be, every year, like if just automatically every year you go up a step. So every GS level has 10 steps. You could be a GS 13 step 9. And every year, the normal promotion path is to go up 1 step. A great way to win friends in government is to write nice things in their performance review so they get a step increase, which means that they jump 2 steps in 1 year. We usually set time aside every week to do that for people that had helped us. But it doesn't mean you enter as a GS 1. You'll apply for a job in the federal government that will specify what the GS level is. And then you'll either be qualified for that or you won't. So that was a slightly complicated situation.
Yeah, no worries. So Adara says GS stands for general schedule. So thank you, Adara. Yeah.
That's why I thought it was general schedule in my head, but I was like, then it's general schedule, and that can't be right. But no, it is, of course.
Lovely. Bureaucracy, am I right?
Yeah.
So this is the final question. We're gonna end on a hopeful, look-forwarding note. So besides Estonia, are there any governments that are really doing tech right?
Okay, well, I also am going to freak out and love Estonia. Tallinn is like my favorite place on earth. I recommend visiting. And I recently got to be at a dinner with Tomas, their former president, who had helped initiate their whole law that they can only ask you for information once. So keep fanning out about Estonia. I think the Canadian Digital Service is doing some really great work. It is not a coincidence that is being led by many former members of the U.S. Digital Service in Canada, which is pretty cool. I did think there's a lot of opportunity for newer countries, which is part of why Estonia was able to make such leapfrogs. It's only been a country since 1991. And so looking there is pretty inspiring, but I'd also look to Canada.
All right. Well, Marina, thank you for joining us this evening. It was so wonderful to have you, and thank you for persevering despite the little blackout in the middle, and thank you for answering all our questions so candidly.
Of course, it was really great being here. I hope you all enjoy your closing ceremonies in a moment on the YouTube link.
All right, thanks again. So like Marina said, we're going to go to the closing ceremony. You can find the link in the Slack in just a few minutes, in just 5 minutes. So I don't know, grab yourself a snack and we'll see you there. Bye, everyone.